Hey girls, hey boys, superstar DJs, here we go. This week we're talking about the third studio album by the Chemical Brothers, Surrender.
Welcome to the Essential Albums podcast, where three guys from 85 have a conversation about some of the biggest albums ever and forgotten favorites from yesteryear. We'll dive into an album's place in culture, discuss its merits, and decide if a record holds up and if it's worth your time. Of course, we get into a lot more than just that. So join us, Ryan, Denise, Gordon, as we dive into this week, the Chemical Brothers. Okay, so this isn't my, actually, no, I always want to dive into something later. Gordon, what question do you want to start with?
No, I guess we went with kind of like a common favorite between the three of us. I'm not sure. I know we all wanted to do a Chemical Brothers album, or it's been talked about. So I'm not sure if it was any one person that specifically picked this album. And I know we also debated between Dig Your Own Hole and Surrender.
And further,
of course, yeah. So I guess, yeah.
I actually thought it was you. I thought it was you. I assumed, I guess.
Who, me? That picked the album?
Well, you're the guy who gave me the Chemical Brothers. You brought Chemical Brothers to me, so I just, like, I mean, maybe Ursula brought it to you. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because it's like, I mean, yeah, it's like a third hand kind of. But I guess we can kick it off by asking, what's your current relationship with the Chemical Brothers? How about you, Ryan? You can start it off.
What's my current relationship? It's probably the same as it's always been. Hasn't changed. Okay, so, it kind of gets, I have to explain how I got to know Chemical Brothers, because I knew them just as like this electronic but alternative band, because they would always get played on Edge, and they're like, they're on Big Shiny Tunes, right? Big Shiny Tunes 2? Or
yes. Yeah, Block Rock and Beats.
And, they have, Noel Gallagher, I think he was on the track.
Yeah, and like Block Rock and Beats won for best rock instrumental performance.
Exactly. So, so I knew them like that, but I didn't get into any of their albums because, I don't know, it was still on the edge of electronic music at the time. I was not listening to any electronic music, and I didn't listen to any pop, like super bubblegum pop stuff when I was younger. So I didn't have like that to bridge me over or anything like that. So anyway, fast forward years later, I'm like, okay, Chemical Brothers are cool. They got some songs that come up, but we're in your car, Gordon, and I think Further just come out, and you're like, check out this. I think we were listening to the first track, and you're like, listen to when this bass comes in. I'm like, okay. And yeah, that moment, I was like, whoa, cool. And then you gave me that album. You gave me that one, I think Surrender, that's it. And I actually was way more into Further because of that experience. So it's weird. That's like the first album for me. So my relationship with this band is kind of inverted. Like Further is my first album, and then Surrender, aside from the singles, or more really just the big hit single, it sounds like it's like newer. Weird.
Yeah, I guess I'll answer next because this will probably bleed into what Denise will probably go on to say. For me, I think when I was thinking back, I think the first album that I actually purchased that was a Chemical Brothers album was the singles collection, the 93 to 03, because I knew all the singles really well, and they were playing the Get Yourself High with Chaos on the radio a lot, and I liked that song. So I picked that up, and then just kind of hanging out with Denise more, and then Denise's brother. Those guys were a lot more into Chemical Brothers, so it got me into it. So that's when I started actually going back and buying all their albums. So I think Surrender was the first one I bought, then Dig Your Own Hole, and then by that time, I think Further was probably the one that came out like way later. I know they got a lot of albums in between, but those are the three that I know I own like for sure. So that's kind of how I got into it. Yeah. And before that, I guess I was more thought of Chemical Brothers like you do, Ryan, in the sense that everybody knows the singles. Everybody thinks of them as an electronic band, but they also have like alternative rock or a rock aesthetic or feel to them. So they kind of go in both directions. Yeah. So that's why you'll see them, like, I think rock fans are also fans of Chemical Brothers, but not in a way like they would be with like Daft Punk. I mean, that's probably a terrible example, but they lean more into the rock than they do like the house kind of.
Especially when they were first starting out, because Daft Punk was a lot more like house music, whereas Chemical Brothers were electronic or whatever, Big Beat, whatever it was called.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I guess what was your relationship with the Minis?
My relationship's deep. So when they first came out, like when Setting Sun came out, so I'll go before that. So growing up, me and my brother, I had an older brother and we had an older cousin. So our older cousin was into like dance music. So when we were younger, it was all, Chris Shepherd compilation CDs, Armin van Helden songs, a lot of like early house and jungle music that was coming from in the early 90s. That was, kind of a branch off of hip hop and samples, a lot of that kind of stuff. So I was really young at this age, but then when I was really young, it was always dance music. What kind of music do you like? Dance music. And then, mid 90s is when all the alternative rock was everywhere. It was all over Much Music. And then that's kind of when I was old enough to actually start liking bands. It became rock. But then when Setting Sun came out by the Chemical Brothers, it was like the merging of the two worlds. It was like this dance group or whatever they were, I didn't know what it was at the time, making this really kind of rocky music, and I had the guy from Oasis singing in it. So my brother, especially, it hit really hard with him. It's my brother's like favorite group. He went out right away. We went to HMV to buy the CD, but those albums, like the album didn't come out until a year after Setting Sun and Block Rockin' Beats. So they were releasing singles. So my brother bought the singles. He bought their first album. So before they even really broke with that first album, we were already listening to them like regularly because my brother became obsessed. So my relationship is that. And pretty much from that moment on, it's been everything. My brother purchased every mix CD, every single, every EP, Japanese releases, pretty much any release you can think of the Chemical Brothers, my brother had. So I listened to through proxy, and I also liked it. So I had my songs that I liked that weren't on albums. I knew their B-sides. I knew their rare stuff. I just kind of knew everything by them because I was exposed to it all, and I just loved it. And I just kind of followed through with them ever since. I can't remember a time I didn't listen to the Chemical Brothers.
So I guess. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Red.
Well, that's quite. That's what I kind of thought, that you had more of like a dance music kind of foundation.
Yeah.
So when Chemical Brothers came along, it was like I don't want to say nostalgic. You're not old enough for stuff to be nostalgic, but like, oh, that's a familiar sound. You got that, and now it was like it legitimized your initial dance music craze.
Well, because it was that same year where Chemical Brothers, Daft Punk, and Prodigy all seemed to kind of hit at the same time in 96, 97. And and then even at the time, because Prodigy had been around for a while, and I remember Much Music playing old Prodigy songs, and I knew them. I just didn't know that they were the Prodigy, but I knew the songs, like No Good Start to Dance and Out of Space. So it was sort of like everything was kind of coming together at that point too, because some of these artists had been around for a while, or even Fatboy Slim. You kind of discover, like, he had aliases, and I was listening to those songs as like a 4-year-old or 5-year-old or something. My brother was playing them, and it was
a dance music thing to do, right?
Seeped into my brain at like a young age.
Because I mean, to compare the two, I mean, to think back during that time, like the 90s, you always had like your standard, like whatever you heard on the radio, like dance music and stuff like that. It was kind of like cheesy, but like you knew what it was. But then this seemed like a good like alternative to that. I guess maybe it's just like house music itself was an alternative to popular dance music at the time.
Yeah, it was different from a lot of because dance music had like a more cheesy, like what Gordon was saying, kind of like more of a bubblegum cheesy connotation with it. Like, yeah, you have like,
right.
But at that point in the 90s, it was a rave culture. So this was kind of coming out of that. And it wasn't as intense as some of the hardcore raver music, but it was of the same kind of ilk. And like,
yeah.
I think for the mainstream rock audiences, it worked because the dance music and trance music kind of became the new psychedelic rock festival. So they were taking a lot of the psychedelic elements out of rock and kind of putting it into like electronic dance music. Because a lot of, especially on Surrender, a lot of these songs sound very like 60s psychedelic rock influenced.
Yeah. Even like taking from some of the post-rocky kind of flowy stuff sometimes, but with a beat. So it's really cool.
So
They seem like they're a bridging band. They seem like because they have their feet in all these different camps that the different audiences can listen to them and feel at home, you know, like I don't know, or are they known primarily as a rock band, like how I thought of them? Like, do they have a following of hardcore electronic, you know, fans who
they're the grand one of the considered one of like the grandfathers of like electronic music at this point. Because yeah, you have your stuff from the 70s and 80s, but it wasn't until the 90s with all this stuff where it was kind of mainstream. And there was supposed to be an electronic music museum, what is it called? Like those temporary exhibits in London this year, and it was called From Kraftwerk to Chemical Brothers was the name of the exhibit. So
oh yeah,
their name is literally just so ingrained with electronic music at this point.
From when did Kraftwerk start?
I think late 70s.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of computer shit happened between there.
And that's the thing too with electronic music. It's not like electronic music didn't continue after Chemical Brothers because it really it blew up even more, but they're still a constant. They're still relevant. They're still releasing albums that are still great. So it's weird how they're like a pioneer and they're a mainstay.
And yeah, it's interesting you call them a pioneer. Like there's some things I wasn't sure of. Okay, like for the example, here's an example. Using the term like "here we go" before a beat drop. For me, was at the time, was that cheesy already, or did the Chemical Brothers like do it and then it just became cheesy since then? You know what I mean?
I don't know. I never really thought of the line "here we go."
What was that band in high school? That rock band? We like "here we go" right before the.
I don't remember. I probably tried to block it out of my memory.
Are you thinking like Crystal Method or something?
No.
The Crystal Method was good.
Yeah, they came out of this era.
Yeah, they came out of there as well, yeah.
And then I think the other thing too, I mean, in the mainstream, electronica wasn't really defined. Like I think the Grammys finally made a like best electronic record Grammy in like the 2000s. So like these guys were getting categorized as alternative instrumental rock.
Yeah, Block Rock and Beats won like instrumental rock performance. And that was the other big thing too, like because it didn't have anywhere it really fit in. It was getting played on rock radio stations, and I believe Noel Gallagher singing on Setting Sun was a huge part of that as well because he was from Oasis, so rock fans were familiar with Noel Gallagher. And I believe, wasn't it Chemical Brothers? They got their start DJing before Oasis shows. I believe that's how that connection initially happened.
Yeah, I read somewhere this week that there was like a bar or a club that they all kind of hung out with before they blew up. So like the Oasis guys knew the Chemical Brothers before they had like What's Starting Morning Glory. Yeah, exactly.
Dust Brothers.
Back when they were the Dust Brothers. That's right.
That actually, because I was wondering, like, how do you break an electronic band like this? I thought it was like maybe DJs had to spin your tracks at clubs, right? But it sounds like they were broke like a regular band. They were opening up for a bigger band, hanging out at the same.
Well, I believe I know a lot of electronic music artists and dance music artists, even if they are making their own songs, a lot of their foundation does come from DJing, and I believe them as well. Like they would DJ shows, and even before, I think it was right before this album, they released a DJ mix album called "The Brothers Are Gonna Work It Out," and the kind of off the fame of "Dig Your Own Hole." Before Surrender came out, I believe that's when it came out between those two albums, or it might have been between the next. I can't remember which two, but yeah. So they were still DJing at this point when Surrender came out, even.
Yeah, something that was big for them. Something that was big for them in terms of that, like the DJing question, is I mean they have their electronic battle weapons, but they were also sought after around like early on for their remixes. They became well known for remixing rock songs, and like all these rock bands were like there's so many remixes that they've rejected over the years from bands just because they don't have the time or whatever, right? They don't want to do it.
It's weird because for how big they are, you'd think that there'd be more remixes that they've done, but there's very little big Chemical Brother remixes of songs. Well, the only one I can really think of is the Voodoo People, Prodigy, which was really big. That was, I think the video was that version of the song.
Interesting. So I guess we can kick off, I guess, the album questions by asking, what was your first experience with this album? I guess you can go for it, Denise.
Hey Boy, Hey Girl, just when that was released as a single. And I remember at that point too is when music videos were at its peak. So they would kind of announce like, oh, the new Silverchair video is going to be Thursday at 4, or the new Stone Temple Pilots video is going to be Friday at 8. And this was one of them. Hey Boy, Hey Girl music video is going to be at Thursday at 2 or whatever it was. And yeah, I remember it coming out and kind of meeting all expectations of anticipation after Dig Your Own Hole.
Yeah, for me, it was, I don't remember it like as specifically as that, but I just remember the song, like Let Forever Be, that video being like everywhere. And like on Much Music, it was just like nonstop. It felt like I've seen the Hey Boy, Hey Girl music video a bunch of times because it's pretty good too. But the Let Forever Be one was the one that always kind of stuck out.
Yeah, because that one got the more radio play, I believe, because again, it had Noel Gallagher singing on it.
Yeah, and it comes off as more like a straight up rock song.
Yeah, whereas Hey Boy, Hey Girl is probably one of the more kind of dancey house tracks on the album as a whole, even.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Like, I got to know them from Let Forever Be. Like, that summer I was listening to the radio, 99 to 2000, that out like Edge 102 all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only song I heard. Like, I didn't hear any other singles from this album.
Oh, really? You didn't know Hey Boy, Hey Girl at that point?
Or Out of Control? Out of Control was popular too.
Yeah.
That's not a rock song, right? So
that's true, I guess. Yeah. Because I guess at this point I was buying this, like my brother and me were buying the CD, so it was just sort of the whole album was there once it came out. So I never really thought of it as this isn't on the rock radio station. So
no, I was in the rock camp, and I was that like so. They were like this bridging band. It's like, oh, it's the rock electronic band. Yeah. So, but that's only so much of their stuff could get through.
True. Yeah, and I think this was at the beginning of the download era, so it might have even been like a download of Hey Boy, Hey Girl that I might have heard. I can't even remember. Maybe it was in the video.
99?
Yeah, it might have been like a download of the song.
Yeah, because that's when Napster would have been kind of taking off, like 99, 2000.
So yeah, it's hard to even recall, but yeah, I just remember the music video being cool with the skeletons, and then the Let Forever Be video being what Pitchfork called the quintessential Michel Gondry video.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like I remember watching it and I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like it's just so crazy. But then after years of watching Michel Gondry videos and understanding his whole, like what he does, it's an amazing video.
Mm-hmm.
So this album had 4 singles. The singles were Hey Boy, Hey Girl, Let Forever Be, Out of Control, and Music Response. So what do you guys feel was the biggest song from this album?
Let Forever Be, but that's only because of my bubble, my rock music bubble of 1999. That's the only one I heard.
Yeah, I'd have to say the biggest song from this album, which is probably the biggest Chemical Brothers song, is Hey Boy, Hey Girl, is it not?
Yeah, I agree with you on that one, Anise.
They played Let Forever Be so much, though. They played it so much on the radio.
They did, because it was the rock crossover, so we were getting the rock radio play.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll save that one for my overplayed, but for the biggest song, I thought it was Hey Boy, Hey Girl. Like when I thought of this album just coming into it, I didn't even know it was the lead single. I just knew it was big based on kind of like how I was listening to music, who I hang out with over the years, the music I listen to in the mainstream. So it's kind of a combination of like what you are, like how you think of the Chemical Brothers or that song, Ryan, or Let Forever Be, and then Hey Boy, Hey Girl, where it's on that house dancey side that I was definitely not afraid to get into. So I guess what would be, we can ask this question now. What do you think is the most overplayed? Do you think it's Let Forever Be, Ryan? I guess.
Well, obviously my biased experience. Yeah, that like seriously, every day, multiple times that would be on the radio, right? So the most, like, every little bit of that song is ingrained in my head as like a hook. Even the B section where it's just instrumental. Like, I'm just playing it around the house, and Clarissa had never heard it before. I'm like, oh, what? It's like, you don't recognize, and not even, what about the B section, like the instrumental? She's like, nah. Oh, the little bit of the hook about, whatever, living in a gutter, that little bit she recognized. But like, for me, it was every little note, because every day, every play, it was like every hour.
Yeah,
seriously.
Because I think I would agree at the time the most overplayed was Let Forever Be, but I think it's because it was just able to be played on the rock radio stations, able to be played on the pop radio stations. The music video was cool, so it was getting played a lot on Much Music, whereas Hey Boy, Hey Girl, it got a little bit of play when it first came out, but it was more kind of just played during dance music blocks, or, Are You Receiving, when that was a show on Much Music. But it wasn't being played on rock radio stations or even pop. Whereas now, because it is sort of just like a just straight up house track, it's still played in the nightclub today because it still functions in a nightclub perfectly. So it sort of built over time, maybe the people who love it, just because it is accessible at any point in time, where Let Forever Be was of the moment, I guess.
Yeah. I agree with both what you guys are saying. I did think it was the most overplayed at the time. I just remember just hearing that song over and over. So coming back to it over the years, I've warmed up to it, as opposed to before I kind of just got tired of it. But I think it's a great track. I like how it mixed everything together. And then that video is it's based on. I did a little research on it, and apparently it's taken the inspirations for it is from a Kinks music live recording of Star Maker, and like a musical movie from the 30s called Dames. That's where the musical or the dancing choreography comes from. So they blurred those things together and made it look old school and new school, where it's like all those like weird transitions, but then it turns into like a reality. It's like super surreal, and yeah, it's just a crazy good video.
Yeah. But I do love the song too. Like, it was overplayed, but I don't know. I got into this thing, especially back during that era when stuff was getting overplayed, where I try to change the radio station or change Much Music when they were playing a song I liked, just because I wanted to control when I listened to it. Yeah. So I didn't really think of it. Like, I always loved like the live drums. It has like the cool, like that Chemical Brothers, especially during this era, was all just cool bass lines, and this song was, one of those.
Yeah. Sweet.
Yeah, but
sweet
then it still had like the rock, like the 60s psychedelic sound to the music too. So it was great. I thought it worked really well.
Yeah, and after like listening to the album, I haven't listened to this album in a while because I always go back to Further. But when it came along, I sang along the whole song. I'm like, this is a good song. So I think it is a good song. It's just, if they had another rocky kind of song, another crossover song on the album that could have worked, that probably wouldn't have been played so much, because people wanted Chemical Brothers, but there was only one song they could have put on Edge.
Well, because they were just sort of doing their own thing. They weren't trying to fit into the rock mold. It just they sort of crossed over and took advantage of that. They were still building their fan base and like the electronic music, which became more of a viable genre at this point. Yeah, no, what you're saying is right, though. The flow of this album is really great. So when you do come to a song like Let Forever Be, even though the vibe is, a little bit different than some of the more electronic dancey stuff, it still fits in, and you have to come along.
It's almost as if they're catering to I know they probably weren't, but maybe in some sense, they don't let you go on too long with like the EDM stuff, like the 4 on the floor, before giving you some break. Where whether it's like a ballad, I think there's only like 2 or 3 tracks in a row where you might have that before there's like a halftime feel or something else.
Yeah, because a lot of times you'll have like a song, like you'll have a song like Orange Wedge between Out of Control and Let Forever Be, and it's almost like it's kind of filling in the gap between the change in musical style from going to the more aggressive to the more kind of hippie, kind of more atmospheric, dancey, fun vibe of Let Forever Be.
Yeah, I think you need a song like Orange Wedge as a good change-up song, because you'd be going from like Out of Control to Let Forever Be, and I don't know, it might be a little too jarring. So I mean, it's a good transition or change up song.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And you just needed it. Like, I was very happy to have that song come on, have like a hip hop kind of groove. Like, I like the four on the floor stuff.
Yeah.
To a degree,
I was even saying, like, with Orange Wedge, if this was released today, I almost feel like I would have had a feature on it, because nowadays, they work with Q-Tip and Chaos, and they'll throw a rapper on one of the songs that have more of this sort of hip hop to it.
So I guess that's a good segue into, is there an underrated track on this album, or is there a song you want to call out? Ryan?
I would say that, okay, a couple things. The last track, Dream On, is amazing.
Yeah.
And even the secret track or whatever, like, that part should have been part of this. Well, okay. Nowadays, it probably would have been part of the song. There's no reason to put a gap there. But let's consider that whole thing as one song.
Yeah,
I think that is an amazing work there.
Yeah, it's considered like remix, or it's considered a continuation of the same song. It isn't considered as a different song or anything. I don't know why they have
it. It's just the secret track thing.
It's funny because I wrote the same thing for the underrated. I put Dream On. I think it's a great closer. It kind of changes it feels very like you just finished a live set, which this album pretty much functions like one of their, I don't know if you've ever watched any of their live sets, but it very much functions like this album. Songs bleed into other songs. They, will slow stuff down, have big build-ups, have the big kind of epic in the middle, and just Dream On kind of comes in nicely. It kind of reminded me of like Smashing Pumpkins vibes almost.
Yeah.
The arena rockness of it.
Actually, I remember when I first heard it, I'm like, is this James Iha? Like, a James Iha?
But yeah, no, I agree. I can see a lot of people skipping this track because it's long, and it isn't as in the same sort of big beat sound as the rest of the album.
You got that weird break in the middle.
Yeah, but no, I think it's a great track. I think
it depends where you're coming from. Like, if you're one of the rock guys like me, that's one of my favorites. It's like a song, and it's got all these different layers, and the same with the other sing-songy track, "Sleep from Day," right? That, I mean, there's one. I think there's one other track with vocals, but
with the
that one's one of my favorites. I think that's another underrated track. It's just nice to have a ballad, a female voice come in. It's just
It kind of gave me some Jesus and Mary Chain vibes with the kind of noise rock, and it sounded like it should have been on the Lost in Translation soundtrack.
Yeah, definitely that sort of thing.
Who knows? But yeah, I know. But that song, like, going forward after this era, you had the chill wave kind of come in 10 years later, and it all sort of sounded similar to the vibe of this track.
Yeah, I mean,
definitely chill.
Asleep from the Day. I looked this up. I mean, it's funny that you mentioned a soundtrack, but I thought of a song. It was on the Monster soundtrack, and the song's called "Crimson and Clover" by Tommy James and the Shondells, and it has like a similar kind of guitar riff. It's like a '60s psychedelic rock, but it's like a slow kind of build up, and it reminded me of that song, like so much so that I had to I'm like, what's that song from the Monster soundtrack? So that's why I looked that up. But I like that it starts as like a slow jam. You got that little bit of a build up, and then it kind of goes back out to the slow jam that it started on.
And I also for the underrated, I wanted to mention, like we talked about earlier with Orange Wedge as being sort of like a connector song. I also wanted to mention God Glint for almost the same reason, because it kind of reintroduces like the disco sounds to get you all ready for Hey Boy, Hey Girl. Like, it has like a cool build up. You kind of have the hippie, then I thought at first that sample, like, is that ABBA? It kind of sounded like the Gimme 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 sample that Madonna used as well. But I looked it up and it's not. It's Bernard Favre Earth Message. but no, that's a good kind of appetizer leading you into Hey Boy, Hey Girl.
You know what that bass line reminds me of now, or I associate it with? Fade, Kanye West Fade.
Oh yeah.
It has that same sort of like offbeat thing. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's cool. Like it's got like that the bass line behind it, and just like the build up with the drum machine. Because I think before you kind of had like it sounded more like drum loops, and then this kind of kicks off with the drum machine, and it just builds up and then takes off. So yeah, you're right. It is, in my opinion, or I agree with what you're saying, Anise, that it is a nice track to go before Hey Boy, Hey Girl.
Yeah, because at that point, like to get into the structure of the album, you have like the Sunshine Underground, which is their longest kind of psychedelic. It's almost like they sort of wrote it to be played at festivals, and it's something they kind of lean into more. Like I found the Sunshine Underground sounds like something that'd be on Further or on Geography or something. But then then you go to Asleep, the one that Ryan mentioned, which is sticking with the psychedelic but a lot more chill, and then Got Glint builds it back up to Hey Boy, Hey Girl. So the album just sort of, it knows how to play with the listener to make it.
It's such a sweet way to bring that back in, bring that beat back in too with Got Glint. I don't know if you guys, you've probably been listening to that song longer than me. If you can remember the first time you heard it, because it starts on the end of one. It doesn't start on beat one with the bass line. So you, like, if you don't know that ahead of time, you have no idea. It sounds like you start on one, but when the drums come in, it's like your whole frame is shifted. I just love that little trick. It just immediately gets you back in. It's not like they just started the beat going again. Okay, here we are. They made sure it was smooth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One last thing before we move on from Asleep from Day. Did you guys notice? It's another case of the cave tambourine.
No.
It's another case of a tambourine in this time a giant cave. Like I'm noticing this more and more. For our listeners, I promise next week I will get to the bottom of this and find out where the cave tambourine started, because this is like through pop music for, I don't know, 30 years.
Yeah. I don't know what to tell you, Ryan.
It's got to be an answer.
I like that you keep bringing it up, though. You mentioned it in there, and you first mentioned it in the No Doubt.
I'll mention it every time I hear
it. For my underrated, I had Sunshine Underground, just because it's this week when I kind of listened to the albums in order. So this week, when that song reminds me of Dig Your Own Hole a little bit. Like the last two tracks on it feels like it could be a cousin of like Where Do I Begin and My Private Psychedelic Reel, which is how Dig Your Own Hole finished out. It's just longer. It kind of builds up. It doesn't if I think it serves kind of as two functions where you got like the classic, or you have like the house stuff, but then also it doesn't betray, like if you like Chemical Brothers' older stuff, it doesn't betray like that audience. It kind of brings them on board with that song. It's just a good vibe song to work to.
Yeah, it's a great song.
I find all those like longer, more psychedelia songs is like what they want to be doing, because it's been something that's been prevalent since the beginning and something they kind of lean into even more now. And it seems like whenever they get a chance, that's what they do. And I believe a band took their name from that song, the Sunshine Underground. There's a band named the Sunshine Underground now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought that sounded more familiar than just the song. Yeah.
I'm not familiar with any of their songs, but they're a band that exists.
So what's
one thing about that song I got to mention though, because I was listening to it just the other day, and there's like this really loud like filter sweep sample about like 2/3 into the song. Like I walk out of this room, go into the other room. I had it on pretty loud. My cat's just standing there with like hair all up his back. He's like freaked out. Like, I don't know what the hell happened.
With a lot of the sounds on a lot of these songs, my cat was kind of freaking out, or she put her head up and look around and everything. He was kind of going nuts for a lot of these noises. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's album produced by dogs or something.
I mean, I have noticed that though, like this album, or well, all their albums kind of have like weird noises and like sometimes like high pitched frequencies. Generally, I listen to a lot of music on headphones, but if I listen to it at home, like I'm sure my dog would probably be going nuts.
Yeah, because even like when I was trying to, say like parts of songs I liked, I'm like, what do I even call that? Like alien noises or weird? Like, how do you even refer to it? Like, I really like that alien noise sound in that song, or I know it's funny.
So I guess we can kick this off by asking, what's your favorite track on this album?
Me?
Go for it. Whoever wants to go first.
Yeah. Okay, sure. I'll go. I have to go. What I listen to the most, what I go back to the most is the first 3 tracks. I just love how they all kind of go into each other, and it ends with Out of Control. I'd have to say Out of Control is probably my favorite because it sort of builds to that moment. And I love that bass line in Out of Control. But yeah, those first 3 tracks, Music Response, I love it. It's probably one of my favorite opening tracks. You have it introduces you to like their big beat sound and the bass lines that you're going to hear all throughout the album. Yeah, Under the Influence. It just bleeds right nicely into Under the Influence, which I believe was one of the electronic battle weapons leading into the album.
Yeah, it was.
And yeah, this is where I put like love that high pitched sound in that song, like the alien noises. Like I don't know what that is, but yeah, and then it crescendos finally to Out of Control, where it's like the most aggressive. I love that bass line. Bernard Summer's voice fits perfectly with the Chemical Brothers on this one. I remember even reading Peter Hook saying that he's jealous that he didn't write this bass line for Bernard Summer to sing over. And you can actually find some cool live versions of that, because when New Order toured with Chemical Brothers, they would perform this live, and it was cool to watch. But yeah, that's probably my favorite track is Out of Control, but it's that 3-song run to open the album.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with you, Anise, on that 3-track run. The track I had was Under the Influence, mostly because going into this album, I hadn't heard that track before. And then when I put it on, I was like, oh my God, this is an amazing song. Like the intensity it builds with the constant drum loop with the bass pulsing behind it. It's like you just have so much anxiety hearing that. And then when it bleeds out into like Out of Control and you just follow that for 7 minutes, it's awesome. And then the other good thing about that 3-track run is like, it just flows so well together. So by the time you get to Out of Control, at the end of that song, you've already listened to like 18 minutes of the album.
Yeah. And I will say for Under the Influence, when I would DJ, that was kind of the perfect track to play, because if the dance floor got full and you played it, nobody left the dance floor. Everyone was just sort of in the trance of just sort of dancing to Under the Influence.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
They done. I have a weird answer for this. Okay. I think the song that I like the most is the last track, like as a work. I don't know like how often, I don't think it's my most listened to, but I just like appreciate it the most. And probably to help explain this is like my favorite tracks are not the dance tracks. Those are the ones I 30 seconds in, I'm like, okay, eventually something else is going to happen. I would understand if I was at the club, if I was dancing, or if I was not actively listening to it, it depends on what you're doing. So my favorite tracks are like Dream On, Surrender, Asleep from Day, even Let Forever Be. I really like, because it is a well-written song, even if it's been played a million times. Yeah. But you guys both mentioned Out of Control, and that's like one of my least favorite songs on the album. And the reason is I just don't like the singing, especially in the first verse. Like the verse singing, like it's not like there's so much of it's that's not in key. So
do you hate
I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about it. Am I supposed to just feel weird and uncomfortable listening to it? Like, what the hell?
So do you hate New Order?
No, I get it. I just don't gravitate towards it. I was going to say that's the cool thing about the Chemical Brothers, because they're not just like, some people might just know them as like the house, they make like dance music, or someone might know them as, the song, they make songs for the radio, like the aggressive dance music, or what you're pointing out, all the sort of more experimental psychedelic stuff that they're doing on here that you're more towards. And it's something they do all the time. It's not like they're always making house music and this was the only album like this. Every album I feel like shows just all their different sides to them.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of contradict what Ryan was saying, I had friends growing up who like preferred the dance music or that house, that kind of stuff. So when they heard like the album version of like Hey Boy, Hey Girl, they're kind of like disappointed that it's like building up the way it is. And then the final minute where it's like a club beat, that's the part they love. So they would often try and find like an extended mix or a remix of it just so they can have that part of the song.
Yeah, for me, I'm like, I love the longer versions because I love all the build-ups. I love all the drops. I love just, especially them, they like to play with all like their samples and have different sounds come in and leave just kind of here and there. And I don't know. I find that even their more repetitive songs, there's always something interesting going on. And like a 6 minute, 7 minute song doesn't even feel 6 minutes, 7 minutes because it took a minute and a half to build up, and there's always something interesting going on. And then even that 2 minutes in the middle, it's just like an amazing drop or whatever they're doing. But I always find that there's always something going on to keep me interested. So I don't, even when it's a dancey track, I don't get bored with it.
Yeah,
But I understand if you're not in, like if you're just kind of sitting at home chilling, you don't want to put on "Hey Boy, Hey Girl" while you're trying to take a nap or something.
Yeah, it depends what you're doing. And I'm not really. This is why I'm curious, because like I didn't have a dance music like background, like I didn't listen to it. But Gordon, you seem to be sinking into the dance music easier than me. Did you have a dance music background at all growing up? Was there a period where you were listening to dance music exclusively?
I would call it exclusively, but it was definitely something I always enjoyed listening to. I guess a lot of the music I was hearing like around that time would have been like Energy 108 or like the popular dance stuff at that time. So like, yeah, Ace of Base was obviously popular, and like you can go on and on with those kinds of groups. So I was always welcoming dance stuff, house music, and that it's always good to me. I mean, I don't really, when I'm listening to music, I don't dive into the lyrics unless it's like a singer-songwriter kind of thing. So music where it's like just like beats and stuff like that, I'm on board for. So growing up, I was on board for having that kind of a mix. But if I'm listening to this album, I would think it's almost like a crime to not play "Hey Boy, Hey Girl" while listening to this album.
Right. Yeah.
It's a requirement, I think.
And for me too, like I like dance music. Like my background growing up listened to dance music a lot. My brother's huge into it, but even for me, they're so much different than a lot of the dance acts, just because there is so much going on. Like with just more of, like, not that they're unique and there's no other groups that are making music like this. I think it just functions more for the fact that some, like Ryan, you're saying you don't like the dance tracks, but you still find songs you like on here, that they are just doing so much different stuff. They aren't just very one-sided. And even growing up, the dance music I liked was always sort of like that, because even like Daft Punk coming out was all sort of, it seemed very punk, like a punk way of doing dance music. People like Chemical Brothers and even Fatboy Slim and Armin van Helden before that, and I was more gravitated to those kind of, the choppier and the more aggressive and the more alien noise type stuff.
Yeah. Now here's an interesting question. Like on Further, I dig the dance tracks more. Like I don't skip as much. So is that because at that point they had balance these elements a little bit more as opposed to separating them in different songs?
Well, at the beginning they were very like, it was called big beat. So there was a lot of bands coming out of England, like Chemical Brothers, and there was like Lion Rock and the Propeller Heads. They were making this like break beat, big beat. They were calling it music. Fatboy Slim, another one. Whereas, that sort of like the break dance sort of drums in the song.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then with this album, they seem to have been, it's still a very much big beat sound through the whole thing, but they were kind of getting away from it at this point, because it was sort of, it was very big in the late 90s. You know what I mean? So at this point, it was kind of dying out, because you were even hearing it in like pop music. You would hear kind of break beats and pop songs and stuff too in the late 90s, early 2000s. So yeah, Surrender. And then after Surrender would Come With Us, they sort of lean into the kind of Hey Boy, Hey Girl, sort of more dancey electronic stuff. But yeah, later on, you kind of lose the big beat in their music. It's still sort of there, especially in No Geography. It sort of makes a comeback. But yeah, for Further and what is it called? The Echoes, Enter the Echoes. What was it called? Born in the Echoes.
Yeah, Born in the Echoes, yeah.
On those two albums, I feel like they lose the big beat, break beat kind of sound. It kind of comes back around on No Geography. But yeah, it's more sort of electronic. I don't know how to even explain it.
Yeah, no, I mean, just to add on to that, I think like on the album before that, Dig Your Own Hole, like It Doesn't Matter, track 6 is kind of like a good example of like their breakbeat and how they used it. I think the best example, I think, of a breakbeat on this one would probably just be like Under the Influence, because everything else is more, it's a lot more layered and stuff like that. I don't think there's any like real breaks on this album.
Yeah, not as much as the early.
Yeah, not as as the first two, I guess. So just to throw in a couple other things.
So this term breakbeat is confusing me.
Big beat.
Big beat, breakbeat, big beat.
Well, a breakbeat is like it's like the stuff that Fatboy Slim, and they were all doing, that breakbeat.
It's like a little busier, often not straight up. It's often not straight up 4 on the floor, right?
I think the whole thing is, I kind of read up on it a little bit this week. I think the whole thing is just like when the music kind of stops and you just let like kind of like a drum solo go, and then they would loop that so that way break dancers can do it. So it'd just be like using the best part or the loop of like a guitar fill or whatever, or no, sorry, of a drum beat or a drum fill.
Well, like that,
so
like the classic dun dun dish dun 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 dish, like that's your classic breakbeat.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of, right? Yeah. That's your breakbeat, and you can hear those elements. Yeah, in like Fatboy Slim and like that's how house music was born. By these DJs were sampling hip hop songs, so they were sampling funk drummers, probably. Yeah,
and then the hip hop beats were all coming from the old funk and that kind of stuff. Yeah, but then this was sort of like the big beat, so they were taking those and kind of, I don't know, just making it these big bass sounds. And there's a lot. If you go back, listen to like Propellerheads, Lion Rock, early Fatboy Slim, even like Daft Punk stuff. You'll hear it. You're like, okay, they're all sort of. It's almost like they're all sampling the same songs.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's not really much opportunity for breakdancing on this album.
No, because at this point they were sort of moving away from it.
I think there is like one drum break or something, but I can't.
Like block rock and beats. That's like
Yeah, so for the Out of Control, I just remember the music video. I didn't even realize that was Rosario Dawson in it. Yeah, she's the one that's like. Do you remember that video, Ryan? Where it's like riots. Looks like it's in Mexico, and then it turns out it's actually like a soda commercial. But then it's actually in a riot that you're watching the soda commercial, so it's like eating itself, I guess, or gross. And then I also remember a good, I don't know I guess it's probably a needle drop. It's been a while since I've seen the movie, but I remember it being in the beach when they have to go back to the mainland to get supplies. I don't know if you guys have seen that movie, but it does a good job at making the mainland seem like it's infected and dirty and it's not paradise. And they're just running around pretty much to this song, trying to get like water and whatever supplies they need, medicine.
Yeah, I remember watching that movie, but I don't really remember much from it. I remember the scene where it's like a video game. I don't remember much else.
Yeah, I mean the movie's kind of it's not great. It's a very so-so movie, but the soundtrack's pretty good on it.
I don't remember exactly what happened, but I remember they sort of it's almost like a remake of Apocalypse Now. They stole a lot from Apocalypse Now. If I remember correctly. But,
yeah, I would say there's a lot of references to it. Everybody calls it the what was it, like the Mist, Leonardo DiCaprio's Mist, because he was like pretty hot at that point. At his peak. So I guess the next question we can ask is there a song that you guys skip? I know it's 11 tracks and we're talking about how great this album flows, but if there was one track that you had to pick, what would it be?
I'll jump in. I'll say this is a no skip for me for just how the album flows. It is a shorter album, and for me, the times where I generally throw it on, other than being like, obviously if it's a more of a party atmosphere, I'm going to throw on certain tracks like Under the Influence or Hey Boy, Hey Girl. But generally if I'm listening to the album, it's when I'm at the gym, it's when I'm driving, it's when I'm in a mood where I'm just going to throw it on, not have to think too much about it, hit play, and it kind of takes me on a journey. Like I was even saying to my brother this week, this is probably like one of my top 5 albums for when I'm doing cardio, because it's sort of like the perfect throw the CD on, and it has like nice builds and longer tracks and stuff that would help you when you're trying to, not focus on how much your body's in pain. Which is funny because they went on to do a song for the Olympics that was played during the velodrome, during the indoor biking. So yeah, no, for me it's a no skip.
No skip album.
No skipper.
Yeah, no,
Never.
I mean
There's not even a part of a song.
No, I have to say, like, because since I enjoy, like, the first 3 songs are like my 3 favorite. Once those are played, I'm pretty much like locked in. It's gonna just play through, because at that point you're 20 minutes in, you're almost halfway through the album. So then you can just settle in and let it play out.
It's a good point. But for me, once I get to like Orange Wedge, I'm like, okay, cool. I got like a break from the EDM stuff. And then it's like, okay, Let Forever Be. Okay, it's a pop song. I know this. And then we have the cool psychedelic Sunshine Underground. And then we have another nice song where, this is singing ballad, Asleep from Day. And then Go Glint comes in. At that point, I'm kind of like, I don't want to go back. So I like the intro to it. I'm like, okay. So I give it a few, like, I don't know, 30 seconds or something. And then I'll be like, okay, I see what's going on here. So if I skip that, but then the next track's a hit. So it's like, maybe I'll settle there. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's just, I was in a zone. Sometimes there's good things and bad things about having an album like this. You got to be careful.
Yeah, but
you can bump someone right out of it.
For me, if I'm throwing on the Chemical Brothers, I know what I'm getting into. It isn't like a surprise, especially when it's an album you're revisiting. Like if I'm in a mood where I want to listen to stuff like more akin to like Sunshine Underground, Asleep from a Day, but still have that electronic vibe, I'll throw on an early M83 album.
That's interesting. Yeah. I was thinking like Sunshine Underground has a lot of those M83 vibes, and that's what I'll go to as well.
Yeah.
But for the dance tracks, I like Furthermore. I think probably because they just have a little bit more of this stuff, a little bit more of that flowy psychedelic stuff spread in throughout the dance tracks.
So was Got Glint the only one you skipped? Because you said
no. Okay, so like I might skip Under the Influence.
Oh, yeah.
I might.
I mean, based on everything that you described,
the cool sample rhythm, but it's like, just like constantly that thing. It's like, that's cool. That's a cool thing. And I'll get it if I'm dancing. But if I'm not doing something else, like playing video games or cleaning the house or doing something, I don't know. It's not like an active listening sort of thing. I don't know. How do you guys actively listen to the dance music? Like, don't you have to be doing something else?
Well, it depends what mood I'm in. Sometimes if it's like a Saturday and what do you mean by actively listening? Because if I'm like, just cleaning the house or something, it's not like I'm focusing on the cleaning. I'm trying to actively clean while I'm focusing on the music.
It's true.
I'm trying to do the opposite. I'm not trying to focus on the cleaning while ignoring the music.
Right. Okay, what about like this? Would you ever sit with headphones? Like sometimes I'll just sit with headphones and put on a song that I really like or some album I really like.
Yeah, because like as much as I do it as much as I would do with like putting on Tool and laying back in bed and listening to a Tool song as I would putting on a Chemical Brothers song and listening, because to me there's no sort of difference in the energy that's required. Like some of those Tool songs that have the huge builds and the huge rock out moments, probably best suited for being in a mosh pit or doing something active. But the amount of, if that was the case, then I would never listen to energetic music. And for me, dance music has just always been there for me. Like and electronic music in general. And there's enough on this album where it isn't like, yeah, sure, maybe if I'm studying, if I really want to get jacked up at the beginning, I can put this album on and it gets you all jacked up at the beginning. And then by the time you're settled in, it's more vibey. But I don't know. Everyone's sort of different, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, based on what you're describing, Ryan, like based on everything that you kind of said about what elements that you like from this album, I can understand why you would say like Under the Influence is probably the track. It's probably the most repetitive.
Yeah. Well, it's got that like hook is really cool. That I don't know how to describe it. Like the alien sound is really
under
cool.
The influence, like where it all like kind of slows down.
I just hear the drums and I just want to bob my head.
Yeah, so there's cool moments to it, but like another type of song where I might just listen to it and not be cleaning the house or something. There's more maybe to look forward to, or more things happening where I could follow a story with lyrics, or I could follow, a guitar solo or some other shit. This seems like I got to be moving and doing stuff, or that's where it lands for me. That's when I use these songs.
Yeah, it's like it's at that balance, right? Because I understand what you're saying. For me, I have more of a problem with the slower atmospheric music. Like, whereas when I was younger, I would spend hours and hours and so much of my time listening to like Sigur Rós or something. Whereas
Hmm.
nowadays, I have trouble listening to Sigur Rós because it's so chill. Whereas me, I would rather, if I'm going to listen to something that's kind of more instrumental and atmospheric, I want it to be more upbeat to keep my attention. Because not that I'm getting bored by the Sigur Rós, it just kind of creates too chill of a vibe. Whereas
Right.
Chemical Brothers more on my pace, or something that's like if it's rocky, it's something like Mogwai that has kind of big moments. But it's not that I'm
Mhm.
opposed to the other stuff, because I still enjoy the more chill bands. But for me, I'm just more drawn to the more energy of that a band group like Chemical Brothers would provide.
Yeah, it would be a hard album to maybe put on at a party. As good as it is, there's spots where it drops right down. And that's not really what you want usually at a party.
Yeah, but what I was saying is put on, like I said it to you guys earlier this week, like just put on their their set at Woodstock
Hmm.
from this, because it's from this era, like after this album came out. So you pretty much get those first three albums played in live form. And it's almost like you kind of get it. I remember when Woodstock 99 first happened, and me and my brother, we had pay-per-view, we were recording all the live performances, looking forward to, different people and stuff. And I remember my parents had these friends come over, and the guy was a musician producer, like he has like a recording studio. And I remember him being like, Chemical Brothers, when they were on, he's like, I love these guys. They're just behind computers and they're pressing buttons. He's like, you know what? He's like, they're just turning up and down volume knobs. They're not doing, he's like, but they're like such good producers. And he's like going off. And I'm like, wow, this, like, at the time I was a teen, like not even a teenager yet. And I'm just like, man, this like 45-year-old guy's going off on the Chemical Brothers. So I don't know. It's just, it's different people, I guess, gravitate to different things when it comes to music. But I just like the more energy, upbeat.
Hmm. It has a lot to do with your history of listening, like
Yeah.
where you were coming from. I just lacked that dance foundation, and I was also, studying drums. And let's just face it, it's not the most interesting drum beat to play, so it's
But
not something that I would gravitate towards.
sorry, but that point that I was going back that I was trying to make, I kind of got lost there. But yeah, when you watch the Woodstock performance and you see like the performance of these songs and stuff, and how it's done for a live audience, it kind of, the songs click more. Kind of like what we were talking about with Muse. On the
Mhm.
later albums, we wouldn't find some songs we wouldn't really gravitate towards, but then you see it live and you're like, holy shit, I love this song. I feel like some of their music kind of falls into that too, where when you see their live performance and like the visuals that go along with it and the vibe of their live show, it's probably like the number one band I've never actually seen live that I wish I have, because I've
Mhm.
seen so many live videos of them, and their live show just looks like a journey, pretty much. Like, and I think this album kind of has that same sort of sound where it was almost built to be as like a live performance, as like a set, and
Yeah.
I feel like it functions like that, and it works for me. Like, I love the high energy songs, I love the chill out, I love the dreamy parts, I love how it ends with like it goes back up to Hey Boy, Hey Girl, and then comes right back down to kind of end with the nice chill vibe, where it's almost like everyone's kind of walking to their cars as the last song is playing on.
That's why I love that song so
Yeah.
much. It's just an ending. That's why I really wish that gap wasn't there, because when it comes in light at the end again, it's just, this feels like the end. It's like, yeah, like a story was told here.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned them touring. It seems like they never come to Toronto. Like the closest they'd come, I think they came to Montreal, and we couldn't get tickets for whatever reason, or we couldn't make it because the timing. And I think they do New York every once in a while, like maybe Buffalo and stuff. But it's like they just totally miss Toronto. And I mean, when they come to Toronto, if they ever do, I'm willing to spend like whatever it takes to go.
I know they're probably like, there's very few bands that I really want to see live, and they're probably at the top of the artists I haven't seen live that I want to see live. So yeah, if they come, I'm for sure going. Like, I've talked with my brother about going down to the US to go see them, but who knows now.
Yeah, maybe we just need to like save up and we'll just go to like England and see them there.
Go to like Glastonbury.
Oh yeah, so I guess for the track I skip, I mean, it's tough because if I want if I were to play Chemical Brothers at a party, I'd just play like a playlist or something. If I want to listen to this album, I'm going to sit down and listen to this album. So, I mean, if I had to pick a track, I would probably pick Orange Wedge, just because, I mean, it's the shortest song and I know how the album flows. So, I mean, I know it's going to go from like a dance beat, those first three songs, to Let Forever Be, which is a rock song. To me, it won't bother me as much because it's not like as jarring. Like I don't necessarily need that transition song. So that's why I said that song if I had to pick one. But I mean, I pretty much agree with you, Anise. It's like a no skip. It flows well. It's a no skip album, really, if you're going to sit down for the album.
Yeah, because especially for them, I know for me, since I have been a fan for a long time, that if I do want a certain vibe from them, yeah, I'll just jump to a playlist or just jump around album to album and be like, okay, I'm going to play all the upbeat songs. But if I'm going to put on Surrender, I'm going to listen to Surrender. I'm not going to jump around. At that point, what's the point? I might as well just put a playlist on.
Mm-hmm. Right. And the other good thing about this band is, or duo, I guess, or whatever, but they're probably one of my favorite artists to just work to. Like the music, the lyrics, you're not looking for those verses, like something deep or anything like that. It's just, and it's not too distracting, but it's enough to push the energy. So like there's like two or three, well, at least three Chemical Brother albums that I sit through and I'll work. And
I will mention, because you said they have no lyrics and no real message. I will say I didn't know this until today, but their newest album, No Geography, is a concept album about Brexit.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that until today. My brother told me, because like MAH is mad as hell, and like they have, this album's name is No Geography, so I guess it's all like about Brexit.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I did read though that those guys are they're like really smart. Like they met in the University of Manchester for history, and they're both like kind of like tops of their class, or like had very good grades. So that's where they met. So I mean, that hearing you say that, they definitely they know the historical context, and hearing a concept album by them in that regard would,
because it's weird to think
really interesting.
Like they've just been such a constant, and especially in the UK with just making music, their output is just insane for how long they've been out. They're always putting out music that it seems like, I know me and Gordon got into this conversation a little while ago of like, are the Chemical Brothers famous? Like, are they famous people? Like how big are they? But I guess in the UK they have they're somewhat important. They have the museum exhibits named after them. They made a song for the Olympics that were in London. So yeah, so I guess they're at the point now where they will make, statements about Brexit.
It's probably been a while since they had a hit in the US. When was the last Chemical?
Go is really big with
Go is big.
That was like 2016.
Yeah.
Okay.
They had
so what about before that?
Well, it seems like every album they release, there's at least like one song that gets radio play, at least in North America with us.
Yeah, so I guess before that, just kind of looking at their big singles, before that would have been like Further and like, I guess Escape Velocity. You got Swoon on there. Those ones I remember. Another World were kind of, I remember hearing them on commercials. I think I saw Another World on the Victoria's Secret commercial.
Because even with their last album, they did the whole slowly released singles thing. So when they did release like Free Yourself, Ma, and Gotta Keep On, they were getting like, especially Free Yourself and Gotta Keep On, were getting radio play.
And they did have a promo single, Chemical, like spelt out. That didn't appear on any albums.
Yeah. So yeah,
maybe if they had another rock crossover song, they'd be a lot more famous.
I think they're not worried about fame at this point.
I know. I'm not saying that's what they're after.
But what I'm saying is, every time they do release an album, their singles, they usually do like chart. Like they may not go number one, but they'll still chart like in the US. And I didn't really get, when I was looking on Wikipedia, it wasn't really showing Canada numbers, so I couldn't really get a good understanding of how well they do here. But it seems like their songs are everywhere. When you're watching a hockey game, they always play Galvanize. You always hear it in the arena.
Maybe that's why they don't come to Toronto, because they don't have great numbers here.
Maybe.
So yeah, I guess for the artwork on this album, basically it was provided by Kate Gibb, who they worked with on a bunch. There's a few albums in a row that kind of look similar. So basically, she's a London-based artist that does the silk screen stuff. It's kind of like what was his name, Andy Warhol, like that kind of art. So basically, the photo that's used in it is Jesus Amongst the Fans, which was by Richard Young, and it's basically a guy that's like dancing, going crazy at like a festival. The picture was taken originally in 1976, and so this guy would just go nuts while even it's like everybody else is just sitting down, chill, doing their own thing. This guy would just be standing up, dancing, going ballistic, and so that's the picture they used, and it reminded of Ed Simmons of a show that they did in the Midwest where like they were playing a slower stuff. Everybody was sitting down at a festival, and one guy was just going nuts. So like, yeah, that makes sense for the album cover. So yeah, Kate Gibb, she did a bunch of other stuff like Come With Us, the Brotherhood album. I think it was like a stretch of like 3 or 4 albums after this that she did the cover art for.
I've always been a fan of their artwork. I remember that was one of the first things that even when we bought like the first album, Exit Planet Dust, I love like the whole hippie still photography, like those pictures from Woodstock. And then Dig Your Own Hole had like, again, they had like on their single, they had like a picture of a bomb on one. And I don't know, they always kind of had cool images to go along with their releases. And every album would seem like sort of uniform to one style, which I always liked.
Yeah.
So how often is this album in your rotation? I'll let Ryan answer this one first.
Well, it's not the whole album, but I just kind of come back to it it's usually when I'm listening to Further. I keep talking about Further. It's because it's your fault, Gordon.
It's a great album.
But yeah, when I'm listening to that, I'll usually go and like pick out a few ones from Surrender that I like. It's very not the same experience for you guys. You're like, no skip, can't. When you're sitting down, listen to this album, you're sitting. No, I just like take the ones I like. So, I don't know, like every couple months, probably a song or something.
What are some examples of songs that you would take? Like, say you're listening to Further, and then you want to throw a couple on from this album. Like, what are a few?
I would go. I really like the girl's voice. What the heck is it called? Sleep for Day from Day.
Yeah.
So, like, and that kind of reminds me of some stuff on Further. So, like, that's one that I'll bridge over to.
I'll say that's Hope Madival from Maisie Star on the song.
Good to know. Yeah. What else would I go over for?
It's just interesting because I'm
actually
seeing...
Orange Wedge is one of the ones. It's like, it's weird that you mentioned that as a cut for you. That's one of the ones I'll go over for this album.
It's funny because it seems like Ryan is more so like just into the more experimental stuff that they do as opposed to like what they're known for and what most of their fans go to them for.
I'm listening. I'm like, what kind of vibe is Ryan trying to create here?
Well, I think it comes down to like that whole active listening versus passive listening thing. If a song I'll gravitate towards stuff where I can actively listen to it, where there's like, like lots of information in the music, like stuff's happening, moving, there's section changes, dynamic shifts. Not to say that doesn't happen in the more club tunes, but the wait is longer and the build is a lot longer. So
yeah, see, that's the whole thing with like house dance music. It's all about like the patience. And
yes.
Like it's even that SNL skit where it's like waiting for the drop, and then like like a 4-minute video, and like he's about to hit the button for the drop, and he's not hitting the button for the drop. But that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. And when you're at a rave and everybody's like going and everybody's feeling that, and when it finally drops, yeah, holy shit. But when I'm sitting like listening to headphones and like reading or something, it's like, well, actually, if I was reading, that'd be okay because I'd have something to read. But if I was actively listening to it, I'd be like, it's coming. It's coming.
I feel like you just don't have the right moments. Like for me, like to jump on that question, I listen, this is probably one of my top like 3 albums I throw on when I'm doing like cardio. It's probably like this, along with Daft Punk's Alive and Something by the Prodigy, because like those, like this is like perfect for, I want to get an hour of cardio in. I can just throw this on and I can just run for an hour, bike for an hour, jump on the elliptical for an hour, and it kind of takes you through all the emotions. You can take breaks when the album slows down, and you get the extra energy when the album builds up. So it's perfect for that. in my old age, it's good for that when I'm not going to the dance clubs as much anymore. But even just the drive, like this is a good one if you're on like a long drive and you kind of need something that's gonna, that's constantly changing, constantly doing something different, but still up tempo so you don't fall asleep. Because I remember when I was driving up to Sudbury, I listened to this album just because I knew there was gonna be, and I downloaded. That was I think when No Geography came out too, so I downloaded a bunch of Chemical Brothers when I drove, just because it was perfect music for a long drive.
Yeah, it does sound like it because of the flow of it. Yeah, if you're driving or doing something where you have a whole hour, yeah, it does take you through a nice little trip.
Yeah.
But I would be afraid of falling asleep at the end there.
No, it's funny because I think I own the CD, but I couldn't find it. So I think it's still in my car. So I totally agree with what you're saying, Anissa.
Maybe
It's a good driving album. Or maybe, Ryan has it. I'm not sure where it is.
I
right
gotta
now.
go through my boxes. I have like every CD we've been talking about, but I just have to go through my boxes in the basement. I have no use for CDs anymore.
Yeah. For me, I would say there's 3 albums by the Chemical Brothers that I constantly have on rotation, just that I like to work to. There would be this one, Dig Your Own Hole, in no real order, and Further. Those are the 3 that I can just put on. The flow is like perfect for working. So I revisit those constantly.
Nice.
So I guess this gets us to our big question, because I mean this band this duo has a lot of albums. How do you rank the Chemical Brothers?
This is the big question.
Yeah. Well,
this is Anissa's big question.
This is Anissa's big question. We'll let Ryan answer it first, because you only like 2 albums. So.
I'll have the easy. I'll have the easy answer. Like I like Further more than this, but I do think Surrender is more important. So.
Yeah, but just go with your personal. What's your personal?
My gut, it would be Further and then Surrender, because this is always a compliment to me listening to Further.
Yeah. Have you never really dove deep into the rest of their work, or just mainly those 2 albums?
Yeah, no, these are the 2 Gordon gave me, so I don't know. Yeah.
I always laugh when I'm somebody's source for music. It is weird. All right, so do you want me to go, Anissa, or do you want to go?
I can go. Doesn't really matter.
All right, go for it.
So I wanted to, because I know some weeks I don't go back and listen to everything, but I'm like, fuck, I want to go back and listen to like everything, because it's been a while since I listened to some of this stuff, or like some of these albums, just because I've been listening to them so long. It's just been like, you listen to it when it comes out, and then when the next album comes out, you might revisit it or revisit certain tracks or whatever. So I went through and I had to go with my number 1. I had to go with Surrender. This one, just because this was like one of the first times I remember anticipating an album and not being disappointed. Because even in my younger age, I was kind of pretentious when it came to some musical tastes. Not that I'm not pretentious anymore, but I remember when, like, bands back then like Foo Fighters and Silverchair, I initially hated all like their second and third albums. I'm like, oh, this all sucks. But when Surrender came out, I remember just really liking it. So Surrender's number 1. I had to go Dig Your Own Hole, number 2, because that's where it all started, the obsession. Then Further, No Geography, Exit Planet Dust, Born in the Echoes, Come With Us, Push the Button, and then at the very end, borderline unlistenable, We Are the Night.
I mean, I think I probably have a similar ranking to what you have. I put Dig Your Own Hole first. I think Surrender and Dig Your Own Hole are almost like interchangeable. Like it's really hard. I could like flip a coin on which one I listen to more. They're pretty much the same to me. So I did put Dig Your Own Hole as first, Surrender second, and then Further, as mentioned before, those are my favorite 3. And then the 4th one, I put Exit Planet Dust. It has kind of like those. Well, it's a great first album. Has some classic tracks on there. And then I like Push the Button. That was the 2005 release. There's some hidden gems on there, like Hold Tight London, things like that. And then Come With Us, just because I love Star Guitar, and there's some other good songs. Galvanize is on there as well. Then I had No Geography, which was their newest one. I thought it was a pretty solid album. It gave you a good mix of kind of what's popular today and some classic kind of Chemical Brothers stuff on there. Then I had Born in Echoes, and I finished out with We Are the Night. Do It Again's a great song, but yeah, the rest of that album, I don't revisit it very often.
It's probably going to be my favorite album.
No, it's not. No, because
No.
it was weird because like when you look at their just how it went with them, like Exit Planet Dust and Dig Your Own Hole, they kind of had the same vibe, and then you get Surrender, which kind of changes it up. Come With Us sticks with that, but then when Push the Button and We Are the Night came out, it seemed like they almost got too big. It's almost like they were working with too many. They're working with people, making songs for. It's almost like they were trying to make songs that still sounded like them, and I don't know. Just
It's
Kind of the fame spoiled it.
and then it's like they with Further, it's like they just restarted over. They're like, okay, let's like they released the greatest hits, they did all this stuff, and then they released Further and then Born in the Echoes. And I think No Geography is even great. I have a feeling over time No Geography might even move up in my rankings, which is crazy to say for a band that's like, I don't know, like how long has it been now? Like 25 years in or whatever they are. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't sure if like No Geography I like a lot, but I wasn't sure where to put it on the list due to like maybe like a recency bias. So that's why I was looking kind of like historically over the songs like that each album produced. Yeah, No Geography is good, and then I think the two albums that you mentioned like in the mid 2000s, they kind of remind me of like kind of a weird reference, but kind of like Arcade Fire's like Everything Now, where you're like, maybe they're spreading a little too thin on this one.
Yeah.
But then you get further where it's like Radiohead's in Rainbows, where it's kind of like, not that Radiohead needed a reset, but it was like a back to basics, like let's just give you like a classic Radiohead album, a classic Chemical Brothers album.
So for a guy like me who, I'm into maybe the weirder stuff or the less dancey stuff, would Further be the other album to get into, or what other album might be the one that bridges me the most?
Well, if you're already into Further, I'd say go Born in the Echoes and No Geography, because it's almost like
the newer reset.
Yeah. Whereas like when you like were you big into the Dig Your Own Hole stuff, like Setting Sun, Block Rockin' Beats and that stuff?
I do like that stuff, the more like breakbeat.
Then you can jump back to Exit Planet Dust, because you'll just get more of that. And then there's even, if you go around that era, there's so many singles with B-sides that I believe there's a B-sides like collection even on Amazon, on Spotify. So yeah, they have like a lot. So even if you enjoy Further, you can probably find stuff from Further era that was B-sides and just other releases from that time. Like they just have a lot of stuff. They're almost like the Smashing Pumpkins when it comes to B-sides, EPs, and recordings.
That could be overwhelming though.
Like we didn't even include in our list that they did the Hannah soundtrack, which actually has some really good songs on there as well. Like that is, what is it called? Escape 3 or whatever it's called. Like they have good music just everywhere. And like the Velodrome, the Chemical single, like they had the song with Wayne Cohen on the greatest hits. Like they just have they churn out music like crazy.
And the other thing is
concept album. So that's, I think, where I'll dive in next. Anyway, sorry, Gordon.
Yeah, no, the other thing is too with Further, I don't think if you just like rip the version I just had like the standard CD version. So there's another track that's included on bonus versions called Don't Think. That was included. It was on the Black Swan soundtrack, but that's a solid kind of like, I don't know if you would like it because it seems like more like a dance song, or it's just like, it's kind of repetitive, like the loops and the house music. But that's a solid track. And then I don't know. Yeah. I mean, if you had to go back, or if you never saw or listened to Dig Your Own Hole, I would give that a listen to from beginning to end.
Okay. So Dig Your Own Hole, maybe just because it's more important to this band, or is a better album as a whole, but not necessarily catered towards my taste. But a lot of the sounds, like a lot of the stuff that they were doing earlier, didn't make it onto Further or this album. So there's a whole element I'm missing.
Well, what do you mean, like from the early stuff?
Yeah.
Like more like the breakbeat hip hop sounding stuff.
That side of it, I have.
Yeah. You kind of lose it a bit, and once you get to Surrender, like it's pretty much gone. So yeah, if you like that stuff, like that's the thing, because their music has evolved so much and kind of influenced so much of like electronic music going forward, that I'm sure if you went back to any album, you'll find stuff you like, stuff you don't like, stuff you find interesting. They're just so. They're so innovative when it comes to this,
which is good. Which is just like the Pumpkins you were saying. Like there should be a bunch of different stuff. That
Yeah.
way they can, people will have their favorites. We should have different favorites. We shouldn't all like the one hit single, Let
Yeah.
Forever Be Yeah.
That's why I found with like Push the Button and We Are the Night, they kind of were slowly going into a box. That's what I almost felt like, that they weren't really experimenting as much. Because not like there was bad songs. Because even like with Come With Us, like Come With Us is a good album, but I only think there's really 2 or 3 songs on there that actually do anything different. It just seems more like Hey Boy, Hey Girl was big. Let's try to see if we can do that again. Which I don't think that's what they were trying to do, but they were kind of leaning more into like the dancey sort of, they were getting different sort of sounds and stuff for more dance type music. And then Push the Button and We Are the Night was, I don't know, it just seemed like they sort of lost it. But then Further, where you jumped in, is kind of like a return to form for them, and was a great album.
Yeah. I was actually surprised it made the top 3 list with you guys, both of you guys, because I figured, it's a later album. It's probably like 5 or 6 or whatever. And
like, it's weird because like this is a band that if there wasn't any sort of nostalgia attached to any of the early stuff, I wonder what my ranking would be like, because I think it would be a lot different without any sort of like societal interaction, because they're all great for different reasons, and they're a band that almost has gotten better like over time. So like ranking something like Further or No Geography number 1, it isn't out of the question, because they are such good albums. Just right. And especially with No Geography, I thought they did it right with releasing, because they were releasing singles a year ahead of time. So by the time the album came out, I was already listening to like Ma and Gotta Keep On. They were already on my playlist, so I'd already listened to them 100 times. So when the album came on and I was first listening to the album, I was already looking forward to songs, because I already loved tracks on the album. You know what I mean? Like it was just done right. So they always have something new to listen to.
And I guess to kind of add on to that, whenever I hear there's like a new Chemical Brothers album, I'm like excited to listen to it. Like I'm ready to go on that journey with them. Because generally they don't really have any misses, and it's just I know it's going to be a fun journey one way or another. If they lean into the rock side of it, or if they lean into the hip hop or just straight up house, I'm on board for all of it. So I'm never afraid to put on a brand new Chemical Brothers album.
Mm-hmm.
Except for that one that you guys hate, We Own the Night or whatever.
We Are the Night. No, there's still good tracks. There's good tracks and moments on it. It give it a listen and you'll know what we mean. It just seems empty. It just seems like it's missing something.
So it's not like they went in a stylistic direction that didn't work. It's just...
Yeah, because like, let me just look at the track listing here so I don't start listing off wrong. But yeah, like Saturate's really good. But then like Saturate's a really good song. But then you'll have a song like the Salmon Dance, which is probably the worst Chemical Brothers song I've ever heard. Like it's very cringy that they even wrote a song like this. But then like,
sounds like it might be a joke.
But like Harpoons is good. Like there's good songs on it. So it's not like I hate the album. It's just the standard that they kind of created themselves, it didn't meet it. And especially coming off a weaker album, in my opinion, leading into this one, it was sort of like, oh no, is this like the trajectory we're going on right now? Because
did you think it was the end?
That's the thing, because I know it's been like a running thing on this show when we talk about an older band, how the later years, these bands and artists sort of fall off, or we stop sort of caring because they don't change enough for us, or maybe they change in a direction we don't like. This was a band that was sort of, they were on the brink of being one of those like, oh no, here we go again. And then they sort of like took a moment, took a break, released the greatest hits, and then came back stronger than ever. Where you can arguably the stuff they're releasing now is just as good, if not better, than the stuff they're releasing 25 years ago, which is crazy to say. You can't say that for a lot of bands, a lot of groups.
Yeah, that is a tough achievement for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you can think of like other groups from this era too that have kind of gone quiet. I mean, they have various reasons, but like, I mean, you don't hear too much from Fatboy Slim, or I mean, the Propeller Heads. Like, I know of like that one album. I don't know if they're big still, but these guys have stayed relevant.
Yeah, because Fatboy Slim sort of like kept making music under different names and working with a bunch of people. He kind of lost what he was doing, but he still DJs huge. And Propeller Heads, they never really did anything after that album. I think they just kind of went their own separate ways. But yeah, a lot of the electronic bands, they either disappeared members went on, but then the ones who kind of like started it, like Chemical Brothers are still together. Prodigy is still together, though they did lose Keith Flint last year. Daft Punk they're just like icons. Kind of, I wouldn't be surprised if they release an album this year. I would be surprised, but I wouldn't be surprised just because it seems like they kind of function on their own timetable. But yeah, Chemical Brothers were the only bands from that era that never stopped. Like Prodigy took a break, Daft Punk takes huge breaks, Fatboy Slim became his own thing, and then a lot of those bands like, because there was a ton of electronic bands back then.
Like Crystal Method.
Yeah, Crystal Method, Fluke, Left Fields. There were so many. Like I can probably name like 50 here. A lot of them stopped, changed a lot, or just started making music under different names. Whereas Chemical Brothers just kept chugging along and kept putting out work that people just loved. And because they had the history, they were always relevant because their history was so important that whenever they released something, it was important. And it seems like in England, they're just one of the bigger acts there. Like they'll play like huge festivals and huge outdoor shows.
Yeah, and because they're drawing on so many different genres and stuff.
Yeah.
It's harder to run out of ideas. It's harder to get slide into like a one sort of thing. It's hard. Well, if you're interested, and you're right, it comes across as honest. It's not like they're just doing it because they need a rock song to market to the rock guys. They're just interested in different music. So then you get a lot of ideas coming in. Like
when Further came out, what was it? One of the first songs they released off it was like an 11.5-minute song. So it's not like they're looking for radio play. They're just doing their thing and people will like it. Whereas before it seemed like for those two albums, it's almost like they were releasing songs that could get played on the radio, which didn't always work.
So they're like, okay, trying is not working. Let's just be ourselves. And that worked.
Yeah, I don't know what happened exactly, but yeah, from an outsider, it looked like, okay, now they're working, every song has someone singing on it, or at least like a lot more songs than before. Mm-hmm. But like you did get like songs like Believe that I really liked, and and Galvanize and stuff during that era. They released some of probably their most popular songs during that era. Even just as far as an album goes, it's almost like the albums took a step back, whereas the singles might have been a little more radio friendly.
Now I know you've kind of spent the last few minutes answering this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Is this their peak? Because when you look at the discography and the record sales, this is the last album that they had that went platinum. So I know we're fans, so we have like a different answer, but did this peak? Is this the peak of Chemical Brothers in the mainstream?
I would say it's for the mainstream. It's weird because back then, like what they were doing seemed like it was more like relevant. It was new. It was like cutting edge. It was kind of getting radio play. But now, just the amount of respect that they have now and how they're viewed now, it's almost like it's a peak now, because when they're releasing something like No Geography, there's a lot more attention being paid to it than when they released Surrender. So I feel like they have a lot more power now. Like 5 years ago, they were doing songs for the Olympics. They did a soundtrack for Hannah. Like it seemed they did a song for Hunger Games. Like they're just so much bigger now than they were back then. Where artistically, you can maybe say that's when they were doing their most cutting edge stuff with Dig Your Own Hole and Surrender. But I feel like as far as their power is, it's probably now. So it's almost like artistically, yes, maybe the late 90s was their peak, but as terms as like them doing something and people paying attention to it is now.
And that, like, in terms of their peak in I guess where they peak on the charts, because of all that extra attention now, if they just released another crossover rock kind of song, well, that would easily, like, so long as
they still chart
good, but
they still chart on the electronic dance music charts, just that there's charts specifically for them now, whereas before they didn't really have a place, so they were getting on the pop charts.
Yeah,
the rock charts.
I'm talking about getting your song on Chime FM or whatever. If you have a song that can make it that far, then it's.
That's the thing, though. When they released Galvanize, where Chaos was on it, that song got played all the time, just because there was
that's true.
Someone singing on it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll agree with you guys. I think this is probably the peak of like maybe their popularity in the mainstream, but they have endless credibility. I mean, they always just like if they want a feature, they'll just get Q-Tip. It seems like they have endless credibility. And I think the other thing is too, when they want to do something like a soundtrack, it creates waves. It's like, oh, Chemical Brothers could be doing the soundtrack. Okay, let's get ready for it. Like it's like Daft Punk. If they want to do a soundtrack, they do the Tron soundtrack. Everybody's here to buy that soundtrack because they know what they're getting.
Yeah, I said chaos earlier. I meant Q-Tip. I don't know why I said chaos.
Okay. Oh, well, he was on a song too, so.
Yeah.
That's really indie though, I guess.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask one other thing. The final question I guess we have before we get into the main question is the album's place in history or their place in history. And you hinted at this before, Anise, earlier. Are the Chemical Brothers popular? Like, I mean, when I looked at their Spotify, they don't have a single song that has over 100 million plays, which I think is a first for us. So like, it seems like they're not looking at Spotify alone. It seems like they're not that popular. And I wonder how many like listens how much interest this episode will have. But at the same time, when you look into it and the loyal fan base that they do have is very loyal, and they do turn out and they do have muscle.
I was looking at the numbers too, like not to like get too heavily in the numbers, but I was saying how like the amount of monthly listeners they have is no different than a lot of the rock acts from like the 90s that are still kind of kicking around. So I think they're somewhat popular. I think their music just might be more like they don't have like Hey Boy, Hey Girl is the most streamed, followed by Galvanize. But I feel like probably more of their stuff is like there isn't as many spikes for songs. There's probably people who just go back and listen to specific albums. Because like I'm surprised that like Block Rock and Beats and Setting Sun aren't just through the roof for plays.
Me too.
They're not even in the top 5. So it's kind of like, what is it? Just like Block Rock and Beats is number 6 with 23 million, and then Salmon Dance is up there even, which is a song I pointed out as hating. But it seems like all their singles are just kind of equally listened to. Like there isn't as many spikes with their songs as much as like some of the older acts that might have their 3 biggest singles on playlists that are just getting played nonstop. You have Hey Boy, Hey Girl that's probably on some sort of dance playlist. And then everything else is just based on the fandom.
Yeah, like do they have much of a cult following? Because if you have a dedicated fan base that is like, well, if they're dedicated and reliable, you don't really need to be huge in the mainstream to keep the machine moving.
Well, like huge in the mainstream for them, it's a little different. Like they're releasing 11-minute, 8-minute songs. Like I don't think they're really looking for to have like a number 1 hit single on the radio. They're pretty much like a legacy act at this point. Like if they tour, it's going to be at big venues. If they release a song, it's going to get some sort of attention. Like it seems like they're in the conversation when it comes to soundtracks and things of those nature. Like they're included in these things. I don't know. I feel like they're not household names, but for people who know music to some extent, because I remember in the summer there was like one of those things on Facebook where it was like post 10 albums that affected your childhood. And I was surprised how many people were posting Chemical Brothers. I know it's like a smaller sample size and it's something stupid like Facebook votes, but I was still like, whoa, that guy listens to Chemical Brothers? Hey, that guy listens to Chemical Brothers? It was a bit kind of eye-opening.
And I think the other thing is too, like, since we're here in Canada, like, if we were to have this conversation with anybody in like the UK, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, they're the biggest band." Like, so maybe it's just like an overseas thing or something like that. I'm not sure, but I mean, I was thinking like after thinking of like how popular are they? It's like we're kind of in the perfect spot because we grew up with the 90s. We know who they are. And then, but the other thing is too, like when you hear songs like Go, which are popular, it's like, are people like seeking those songs out? Like they Shazam it and they're like, oh, okay, whatever. Like they're not really listening to it or embracing it.
Well, the thing for me is like songs like Go and Galvanize are not even close to any of my favorite Chemical Brothers albums. Cause I feel like if you are like a Chemical Brothers fan, those songs aren't really like the best representation of who they are. Whereas those are the songs that I hear being played. Like they'll be played like on the radio or like during a sporting event or something. So it's I don't know. It's almost like for me, they're in albums group. They're not really like a singles.
Do those songs get?
Sorry?
Yeah, sorry. Do those songs get thrown in playlists a lot?
I assume just by how the play counts look that Hey Boy, Hey Girl, Galvanize, and Go are on some sort of playlist because they have the most by a wide margin, like plays. But other than that, it's all seems fairly even, other than like Block Rockin' Beats and the certain singles I'm sure will have bigger bumps where, I don't know, I feel like they just have their fans as they release music, it gets listened to. I'm sure Block Rock, and that's another thing too. There's when you get to like Block Rockin' Beats, you have multiple different versions. You have the radio edit, you have the version on the greatest hits, you have the version on the album. So the plays on Spotify are probably getting diluted because when you go on Spotify, they have a single for every single because they have so many B-sides. So if you do search like Setting Sun, you might not be listening to the one on the album. You might be listening to the one from the single or the one from the greatest hits. And then you have Surrender, you have the deluxe edition plus the regular edition.
I wonder if bands will stop doing that.
Plays nowadays, like even when you look at this, it's being so diluted, but whatever. I think they're popular. I'm going to go with that.
Yeah. Did you listen to the I didn't even know there was a 20th anniversary of Surrender. Did you listen to that this week?
I didn't listen to it this week, but it's just like remixes, isn't it?
It's like almost 3 hours long, but yeah, it just turns into like just remixes, extended plays. There's a bunch of B-sides on it, but it's mostly just remixes.
I've probably already heard the B-sides just from singles and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like Diamond Sky, Studio K, Power Move. Yeah, I've heard Electronic Battle Weapon 4. Yeah, I know those. So it's nothing new, I guess, other than the remixes.
Yeah. And then I guess just to kind of briefly explain before we ask the question, the whole thing with the electronic battle weapons, basically it's what DJs do. They release records like on a white label. So that way DJs, when they can test their material and they have nobody has like any I can't think of the word I'm looking for here. Preconceived notion of what it's like. Oh, this is, nobody knows what it is, right? So I think I did get the Brotherhood album, which had 10 Brotherhood tracks, which end up becoming songs or B-sides to their albums. So I thought that was interesting. Like that's how they test their material. They'll give it to DJs, 500 copies, send them out. Because
in the early days, electronic battle weapons were like, you just heard about them because they're only on vinyl. It's like, oh, they have these like where they release it and it usually ends up being a song, but it kind of gives you like an idea of what the album's going to sound like. But yeah, I think this is around the time where the next album, I believe it began in Africa, was a electronic battle weapon. That was the first time that I first heard it as an electronic battle weapon as opposed to the song. So yeah, it was
such a cool name. Such a cool name for a focus group.
Electronic battle weapon. Yeah, I guess. But I know that it was always sort of like a mythic thing that you kind of heard about, and then when the internet era came, you were able to download them and hear them before the album came out, and then they released them all as part of the greatest hits. So at that point, you were able to get the first like 3 that were hard to get and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So do you guys have any final thoughts before we ask the question? Anything you want to mention that we missed?
No.
We're good. All right. Shoot. So I guess we'll ask, is it essential? Who wants to go first? I can go first if you guys still want to.
Go for it.
Go for it, Gordon.
All right. So, yeah, I mean, yes, I think this album is essential. I think it's a good mix of everything that you saw before the first 2 albums and then everything that'll kind of come after. Let me see what else I had here. I like that I think Chemical Brothers are the masters of mixing house or electronic music and giving it a rock feel, even down to like the structure, the sequencing of the album. So if you're not a house or a dance EDM fan, I think you'll still like this album listening to it. So I think it's a good pick for us, at least to focus on for an episode of our Essential Album podcast. And then, yeah, we talked about this at the beginning, but I love the first 3 tracks, especially how it hooks you. I think Chemical Brothers are masters of digging their claws into you. Like, for example, you can think of like Further. You think of those first 2 tracks, that's like 18 to 20 minutes of the album right there. So you look at a third, and it seemed like it was only one song. So I love the energy and what they bring on that regard. So I think this is essential. I would argue that they have at least 2 essentials, maybe even 3, based on the rates. For me personally, based on the rate, how often I listen to those 3 albums.
Whoa, yeah, 3 essential albums. That's huge.
Yeah, they're popular. They're popular to me. I love these.
Essential to Gordon. I will say this one's essential too, just because for a few reasons, but because it's such a bridging, like Chemical Brothers bridge, and specifically on this album, it bridged to so many different camps. It introduced electronic music to a lot of people who wouldn't have been into that before. So that, and it also doesn't sound dated. Like it doesn't really, not like they're using samples that sound like, that's definitely from the 90s or something. I don't think so. And some of the drum sounds that I was listening to, I'm like, okay, that could have been like Justice or Daft Punk or something like from last year. So it doesn't.
Yeah, because a lot of their
I think for those reasons, yeah.
There's a lot of the sounds they use are like original enough, or they don't use a lot of like samples. A lot of it's just sort of the electronic equipment they're using or whatever drum machines they're using.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so it makes it an original. This gives it original vibe, so it doesn't sound dated, and it bridged to a lot of different for a lot of different people in the rock world, especially.
Yeah, because I'll jump on kind of what Gordon was saying, because it's hard to say Surrender is, like, I'll say it's also essential. It's hard to say Surrender is essential because Dig Your Own Hole seems like even more important because of when that came out, was sort of like the electronic music boom. It seemed like it's almost like there should be a documentary made about Dig Your Own Hole, Daft Punk's Homework, and Prodigy's Fat of the Land, because those 3 albums just seem so important to like electronic music going forward. And you can argue that all of music is electronic music now because all these elements are just all over the board. Like your average pop song would have been classified as electronic dance music 20 years ago. So yeah, Surrender, it's just you had the Hey Boy Hey Girl, which is iconic dance song, but when you go through the album, it's not even a good representation of what you're going to hear. It's a journey, and that's just one of the big moments on it, one of the stops that you make along the way. It even comes like so late in the album, it's almost like your final peak before the come down. So I'd say it's important. I feel like everyone should go back and listen to it. Like even if you don't like electronic dance music, this is one of those albums where it's like, just listen to it. You'll find something you like. Listen to Dig Your Own Hole as well, because I can see if you're into more of like the hip hop way of things or more of like the house music way of things, I can see how some of the more psychedelic things might deter you on this. But if you go back to Dig Your Own Hole, you got some more of that house music stuff on there. So I don't know. To me, I'm with Gordon. Like Chemical Brothers seems so important to me because it's almost, being a fan of them kind of shaped all the music I listen to in a way. Like when you get to like the rocky stuff, dancey stuff, the dancey rock stuff that was popular in the early 2000s was sort of playing off this, or bands like groups we mentioned, M83 sort of had Chemical Brother vibes to their music. So yeah, I don't know. I feel people should respect
Okay, but like if you were gonna say, hey, this is the representation of the band, would it be Surrender or Dig Your Own Hole?
Well, that's the thing. They're so different. Like they're like this. To be like, I'd say Surrender is a better representation. Like when you start getting into like the newer stuff and everything, but Dig Your Own Hole was just such a moment. Like Dig Your Own, like just that year, just how everything played out. Like there was, I know I talked about like the big 3, but you still had like Crystal Method and big songs from just artists you never even heard ever again. These dance acts just popped up in 97, 98, 99 and disappeared. And the fact that Chemical Brothers have been able to stay relevant since then till now, where they're releasing, when you read reviews for No Geography, a lot of critics are calling it their best album, which is crazy. Like how many artists do you get who are 25, like over 25 years in, like 10 albums in, people saying it's their best work? It's crazy. And it's you have to kind of go back and see where the grassroots of not just they started, but just like the movement of electronic music in the mainstream.
And to add on, I guess kind of what you were saying, Anise, I think Surrender is probably the better representation, but Dig Your Own Hole is probably the more recognizable album by them.
Yeah, because it's the same thing when you get to like Daft Punk and Prodigy, you kind of get the same sort of thing with those groups too, because you listen to Homework, you listen to Discovery, they're really different. Like Homework is a lot more chopped up and put together, whereas Discovery just seems a lot more tight. And
yeah,
it's almost the same thing with this, where Dig Your Own Hole seems a lot more like a bunch of young kids just fucking around with these cool sounds, whereas Surrender is a lot tighter.
Yeah, and something else I forgot to mention. This album is really like cohesive. I think the other thing with like Dig Your Own Hole, it is a fairly cohesive album, but this album's probably like their most cohesive, and then they hit that again with Further in terms of just being like the most cohesive without like if you're not including Don't Think on that, which is a great track, you should always include that. But I think the next closest where in terms of like that cohesion or just like having a solid album that they hit it on is probably the like Push Your Button. It has a similar sound, but like it didn't, like what Anise was saying, it doesn't have the teeth like that these albums have. So that's where it kind of falls behind a little bit. And then the other albums, they seem like a good collection of kind of all over the board, but it doesn't have like an across the board kind of through line.
Yeah. And the thing is, if you really are into this music, like we were saying back in the Smashing Pumpkins episode, they have so many B-sides and so many, just tracks that are on like live mixes or versions of songs on soundtracks or whatever. They have a lot of work. There's a lot of Chemical Brothers to listen to.
Yeah, they do a lot of video game stuff too. Like, yeah, hearing like just doing the research this week and like a bunch of classic PS1, PS2 video games. Like, oh yeah, they were in that, like Wipeout and stuff like that.
Nice. Seems appropriate.
Yeah. So, I mean, they have a presence. So, like, if you've seen movies, you will recognize one of their songs. Maybe you don't know the name of the song, but, like, if you go visit their discography, you're going to be like, oh, okay, I remember that song from that movie. Like Vanilla Sky or something. Mm-hmm. Sorry, did you have something to add, Anise? I think I cut you off there.
I forgot.
Okay.
Yes, I did. Thanks a lot.
Sorry about that.
It must have not been important if I forgot.
I mean, so that's all I have. Do you guys have any final thoughts?
Listen to the Chemical Brothers.
Yeah, check out Further.
Check out Further.
They're great to listen to while you're working too. That's what I recommend them for.
Yeah, and definitely. Like what I was going to say about the whole Canada thing. It was weird how I couldn't find numbers and stuff of how well they sell and stuff in Canada, considering Canada seems like a big area for like dance music, house music. Because we have a lot of like Mastercraft, Deadmau5, Felix Cartel. Like we have a lot of Canadians who are kind of big in the dance world. That's why I was sort of surprised that Chemical Brothers don't really have they don't come play here live. I couldn't find their numbers here. Like, did they chart here? It was hard to find any sort of Canadian information. But that's the joys of living in Canada. We just get lumped in with the U.S.
Yeah. Please, Chemical Brothers, please just come to Toronto. You don't have to come to Montreal or Vancouver.
Please,
just Toronto.
Just come to Toronto. I know it's a pandemic.
Just once.
Yeah,
and
wait a little while.
And I hope like it doesn't go like the Radiohead way where like the stage collapses on the stage hand is. Okay. We want you to come. Please come multiple times. So back to Toronto. All right. I mean, that's all I got. So I guess
I guess we can say it out.
All right.
All right.
Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to the Essential Albums podcast. That one was recorded in February. We bumped up Daft Punk's episode to next week in light of the tragic news. So rediscover the robot duo as we dive into their second album, Discovery. Watch out for new episodes. You can find us on Anchor, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. You can give us a follow on Instagram at The Essential Albums Podcast. Original music by myself, Ryan Dugal, and artwork by Vincent Tran.